I'm married. You see how easy I'm controlled? All right, well, listen, Les, thanks very much. And for the organizers for having us out tonight. We really appreciate it. And Sarah, thank you for your kind comments about APP. We appreciate it. Yeah, we've been working hard for the last 4 years. Now, just out of curiosity, Max, you got something to turn off? All right, no problem. How many people here have not been to an Alberta Prosperity Project event before? Okay, there's a few of you. Great. How many people here then are already on the independence train, want Alberta to become a sovereign country? All right. And how many people here are not yet on the independence train? They want some more information before making a choice for their future. Okay, we got one back there. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack about Alberta sovereignty, but I want you to think about something. September 1, 1905 was when Alberta joined Canada. What do you think the percentage of the population in Alberta was that voted to join Canada on September 1, 1905? How many people? Zero. That's the correct answer. Nobody in Alberta, or Saskatchewan, I might say, voted to join Canada. Did you all know that? Some of you didn't. We were simply annexed. We never had a choice. We never had a choice. So I want to talk in a few different areas. I want to talk a little bit about sovereignty. I'm going to let Mitch give you a lot of the details in terms of why. And then I want to talk about our meetings in the U.S., our meetings with the leader of the Parti Québécois, and I want to talk to you about the pathway forward in the context of Mr. Lukasik's question and where we are and how we expect to be able to handle this, all of this. All right, so let's start off with sovereignty. In a very real way, sovereignty is the highest form of anything. There's nothing above something being sovereign. So in its highest form of expression, it is ultimate power and control, okay? So sovereignty at the highest level is ultimate power and control. So, for example, God is sovereign, there's nothing above God. At a more elementary level, sovereignty is self-governance. Freedom from external interference. Now, what sovereignty is not is a right or a left issue. It's pragmatic because it benefits everybody. Nobody loses at all when Alberta becomes a sovereign country. You can look at sovereignty as a noble effort. Why do I say that? Because it's the noble pursuit of self-governance, of self-determination, of the noble pursuit of your goals and aspirations, of freedom and prosperity, unfettered by federal control of you, all right? Unfettered by the World Health Organization control of you, unfettered by the World Economic Forum control of you. At an individual level, consider each one of you as sovereign, okay? And all of a sudden, at some point, there's a regulation. Regulation number 1. So you're a little bit controlled. And then there's a tax. All of a sudden, some of the money that you make, you have to give away. And then as time wears on, there's more and more regulations. And then there's more and more taxation. And all of a sudden you find you can't do anything without a permit or some sort of regulation to control everything that you do. And on the tax side, you find that eventually you get to a point where it's really difficult to purchase the goods and services that you need for yourself, your family, for your retirement, for future generations. From a tax point of view, did you know that in 1910, the tax rate in Alberta was 6%? In 1950, it was 18%. In 2010, it was 33%. And today, it's, anybody know? 43%, according to the Fraser Institute. That is the average right now. But did you know that in a sovereign Alberta, if we were completely out from under all federal regulation and taxation, okay, completely out from under all federal regulation and taxation, under those circumstances, that would lead to being able to be out from under provincial taxation as well. And therefore, the amount of money, if you were making $100,000 a year, this makes the math really simple, and you're paying $43,000 in taxes, in a sovereign Alberta, you would pay maybe 8 to 10% taxation at the most. But that would be because there might be some things you have to pay for. For example, there would be a corporate tax. Corporate tax would still exist. It's at 23% right now, but it could be easily reduced to 12 or 15%. And why do we know this? Why do we know that the numbers are the numbers? Well, we produced a document. Some of you may have seen it. It's the Value of Freedom document. It's on our website. It was contributed to by accountants and actuaries and economists and constitutional lawyers and business people and others. And it's there for public consumption. It's there for criticism. It's kind of like what Charlie Kirk says, prove me wrong. Okay, try and prove us wrong. Because the data comes from from Statistics Canada. It comes from various sources in which the evidence is there. So it's based on hard numbers. Reports from the Fraser Institute, for example, and other organizations, Canadian Taxpayer Federation, research reports, etc. So the data is there. So imagine Alberta, okay, and we give to the federal government some $70 to $75 billion every year. How much do you think we get back in transfers? 25, 30 billion? So that fiscal capacity surplus of $45 billion a year is massive. That's what gives us the opportunity to get out from under taxation, okay? Anyhow, let's look at sovereignty from the perspective of the UCP government. Remember when the UCP were elected, the first bill that they introduced was Bill 1, Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act, right? Why did they implement that? They implemented it in order to have some ability to push back against federal overreach of provincial constitutional authority. And not just overreach, how about federal usurpation of provincial constitutional authority? But in what areas? And how has this played out? Well, it hasn't played out very well at all. You would think in a properly functioning federation that the provinces, when they have grievances, should be able to negotiate a resolution to those grievances with the federal government. But how has it played out in Alberta? It hasn't. What's happened, actually? Well, because we haven't been able to effectively deal with the federal government, the provincial government in Alberta has launched some 18 lawsuits against the federal government in the areas of oil and gas, development and transportation, agriculture, controls, censorship, and property rights. And we're seeing the property rights issue play out with respect to the planned confiscation of firearms. So it hasn't played out very well at all. And let's look at, for example, the Premier's pushback with respect to Mr. Carney. After Mr. Carney, by the way, just I digress for a sec. Anybody here pleased with the outcome of the federal election? Okay, well, I'm glad that you raised your hand, Max, because actually there's two good reasons to be happy about the federal election. One is because you really love to be overregulated, overgoverned, and overtaxed, okay? And therefore you voted Liberal, because you wanted even more governance and more regulation and more taxation, right? That's the only reason you could have voted for them. But the second reason is you knew that a Liberal government re-elected would stimulate the sovereignty movement in Alberta. That's why Max was happy about that. All right. Okay, so the Premier meets with Mr. Carney shortly after he's elected. as Prime Minister. I use that term loosely. Anyhow, and she made 9 demands, right? And those demands, she said, if they're not met, will lead to a threat to national unity. What could she possibly mean by a threat to national unity? Only one thing. Alberta's going to leave. That's the only thing it can mean. All right? That's what she said. Now, how many people here attended one of her Alberta Next panels? Oh, a number of people. Good for you guys. Was there a bit of a sovereignty theme for Alberta through the Alberta Next panels that you attended? Yeah? Some yes, some no? Okay. Anyhow, as you know, there were 6 or 8 constitutional changes that were put on the table by the Alberta Next panel, right? What do you think the probabilities are of being able to open and change the Constitution? They're 0. So you already know that. You know there's 4 hurdles to change the Constitution, so there's no sense even getting into them. Now, when you understand the Constitution and when you understand Alberta's history, you recognize that it has been impossible over 120 years to be able to have a province effect change with the federal government. It is impossible. So you come to the inescapable conclusion that we see what's coming at us if we do nothing. For example, the environmental social governance metrics that will be your social credit score that will determine whether you have the ability to access certain services and the ability to travel or purchase certain products, etc. And what's coming as well, I mean, it's right out of the World Economic Forum playbook, of which Mr. Carney is a prominent member, and he wants to implement a digital ID, and he wants to implement a programmable central bank digital currency to be able to control you through those environmental social governance metrics, but to monitor where you are with the digital ID and then to control what you pay for through a central bank digital currency. And we're already seeing it to an extent moving in that direction. China has already got this fully implemented, but the idea of C2, I think it is, in Bill C2, in which the maximum amount of money that you can be using in a trade or a transaction in terms of cash is $10,000, right? So there's this kind of an issue that is coming forward. And it's a dystopian future that I don't think very many people in Alberta who are freedom-loving people want to see happen. More than that, though, think about this. When we looked at that electoral map between after the federal election, and Saskatchewan and Alberta, central and northern BC didn't vote the way the rest of the country voted, it tells you something, doesn't it? It tells you that we have a different value set, different culture than many other regions, particularly in the East. We believe in individualism. They believe in collectivism. But we're seeing our culture being changed. When you think about Western civilization, it was founded on what? Judeo-Christian principles and values that was foundational, not just to Western civilization, but foundational to civil society and the rule of law. And we're seeing that change before our very eyes because, to a very large extent, of the World Economic Forum, the globalist perspective, but also just opening the floodgates for immigration. And the people coming in don't have the same value set. They don't have the same foundational principles. So we're seeing things change before our very eyes. But we still have an opportunity to change it. And we have that opportunity consequent to having a successful referendum on Alberta sovereignty. And I want to touch on this for a bit. I'm sure most people understand the Clarity Act, but is there anybody that doesn't know the basic tenets of the Clarity Act? Okay, so there's a couple people. So I just, for a brief moment here. The Clarity Act developed as a result of Quebec's second secession referendum. The federal government, which missed by a fraction of a percentage point. So the federal government posed the question, does a province have the right to unilaterally become its own sovereign country and leave Canada? And they posed that question to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did an analysis, and from that analysis, legislation from the federal government came forward, which was called the Clarity Act. That's the legal pathway for a province to leave. And this gets to the point of what Sarah was talking about earlier and working together with the people who love the idea of the Statute of Westminster. But nevertheless, there are three criteria, primarily with respect to the Clarity Act. This is getting important to understand because you'll see how it relates to how we can move forward. So the first criteria is you have to have a clear question posed to the public on Alberta leaving Canada, okay, and forming its own nation. Second, there has to be a clear outcome. Well, in a democracy, that's 50% plus one. And third, you have to demonstrate that you've had consultations with other interested parties, such as First Nations, Métis, and other political parties in the province. Okay, so those negotiations, though, occur subsequent to the referendum, not necessarily prior to it. But they can be prior, but it's just that you have to be able to prove subsequent to the referendum that you've had those negotiations and those discussions. All right, so the process then is you have a successful referendum. It obligates the federal government and the other provinces to negotiate with Alberta. Okay? That's the fourth paragraph of the preamble. A successful referendum obligates the federal government and the provincial government to negotiate. All right? So the question is, though, the last line of the fourth paragraph of the preamble says this, and negotiations might lead to secession. Might lead to secession. What does that mean? That means that negotiations could go on endlessly and not lead to Alberta becoming a sovereign country. That's what it could mean. It depends on how it's handled, okay? And I'm going to talk about that right now. So, once you have that successful referendum, the Premier of Alberta then, at that particular point in time, can do one of two things. She can go down the rabbit hole of endless negotiations, and they fail, or she can, within a day or two of the votes being counted, declare Alberta a sovereign country, recognized by other countries in the world. This is quite an important point to understand, because whether she goes down the rabbit hole of endless negotiations, or she says, no, we've had a successful referendum, I am able to declare Alberta as a sovereign country because other countries have acknowledged Alberta's successful referendum. So that can happen. And why do we know this? Because it's in the Supreme Court analysis, which is supreme, by the way, to the Clarity Act. Okay, and this is why. And I think you'll get a kick out of this. So section 154 and 155 is what I'm referring to in the Supreme Court analysis. 154 says this: if a people in a region find themselves in a colonial relationship and they are subordinate to a higher authority, such as the federal government, and they feel as though, and they have evidence for, the fact that they've been subjugated, dominated, exploited, and their self-determination inhibited, they have the right to have a referendum and to form a new nation. That's section 154 of the Supreme Court analysis. Here's the fun part. Oh, and by the way, that is the lawful process, okay? Section 155 says, same thing. You can have a referendum on sovereignty and make an unlawful declaration of independence if you've had a successful referendum and other countries acknowledge that you've had a successful referendum. And there are numerous examples in history of that exact same thing happening. And the most recent was Kosovo in February 2008. They declared their sovereignty unilaterally, and can you guess which two countries were the first two countries 1 month later to acknowledge Kosovo's sovereignty? Canada and Japan. Canada and Japan. So it'd be kind of hypocritical, don't you think, for the federal government and the other provinces not to acknowledge Alberta's successful referendum. Now, the beauty of what I've just said is that Daniel can make a right decision or a wrong decision. The wrong decision is to go endlessly down the rabbit hole of trying to negotiate all of the issues that are relevant to Alberta leaving, okay? Or when she declares her sovereignty, supported by the US and other Commonwealth countries as an example, now she has solved the imbalance in power between the federal government and the provincial government. She is negotiating then from a position of absolute strength, okay? And she can dictate the terms to a very large extent of what she wants. So for example, should we take any part of the debt? What happens to the $400 billion that should come to us in the pension plan, et cetera, et cetera? What happens to Crown land? She can dictate those terms because she has the power to do so. You folks gave it to her through that successful referendum. All right, so let's talk about, for a minute then, what happened at our meetings in the US. Some of you will know this. The first meeting was April the 22nd. And at that meeting, there were a couple of key points that came out. The first is that the US is strongly in support of Alberta becoming a sovereign country. Number two, that Alberta will acknowledge Alberta's successful referendum. And number three, there's no interest in Alberta joining the US. And here's why. Because of three reasons. One, the US can never even entertain a group of people in any area joining the US unless that group of people occupy a sovereign country. So Alberta would have to already be a sovereign country. Second, there would have to be a referendum in the province in which the people of the province of Alberta vote in favor of joining the US. And right now, that's very likely not in the cards. More than that, why would we want to jump from the CRA to the IRS when we can be almost completely out of taxation? All right? So there you go. But the third reason is that there would have to be a majority vote in the US Senate and in the House of Representatives. And that's not going to happen, as the gentleman just said. And here's why. Because the Democrats would insist that Puerto Rico and DC also become separate states. That's not going to happen because the Republicans will never vote for that. So you see there's an impasse here. So we need to focus on then Alberta becoming a sovereign country, all right? Now, we talked about some other things. We talked about currency and that sort of thing as well. But the second meeting that we had was on September the 29th. And the first meeting was an hour. The second meeting was 2 hours. And the purpose of the second meeting was to follow up on the first meeting. We had produced a document for the first meeting, which we updated for the second meeting. It was entitled Benefits of Alberta Sovereignty to the US and to Alberta, okay? And we talked a little bit about that. We also talked a little bit about some of the things that I can't really talk too much about right now because we've been asked not to. But it confirmed that the U.S. is still solidly behind Alberta becoming a sovereign country. Alberta 51 is not on the table, and they will definitely acknowledge Alberta Alberta sovereignty subsequent to a referendum. That is power. And the two people that we're meeting with really are virtually at the highest echelons of power. Chief of staff to one of the most powerful cabinet members in the U.S. administration. So that was that. So that's one of the things I wanted to touch on is the U.S. administrative support. Second thing I want to touch on is the meeting that we had with Paul-Pierre Plamondon. He was the leader of the Parti Québécois. And he contacted us. That was a surprise. So here you have a separatist party that previously tried to pull off a referendum in Quebec, and they wanted to meet with us. So we agreed we would meet with them, and we did for 4.5 hours, Mitch and Jeff Rath, our general counsel. And it was a fun meeting, actually. I thought it was informative in a way, because here are the highlights. Number one, why does Quebec want to leave? Because they want to preserve their language, they want to preserve their culture, and they want to get out from under federal political corruption. Do you think we want to get out from under federal political corruption? You bet. You bet we do. And they're not interested in equalization. Parti Québécois says we're not interested in equalization. We don't need equalization payments. They're getting just about $14 billion every year. Why are they not interested in it? Because they did an analysis just like we did. If Quebec is completely out from under all federal regulation and taxation, then they will have a fiscal capacity surplus that more than compensates for that $14 billion, right? Because they're no longer paying federal taxes, and there's no longer a whole host of taxes on the goods and services that they buy. That created an exchange. We gave them our document, they gave us their document. So it was kind of fun. We talked about pipelines. They're not interested in a pipeline. That's not going to happen probably in our lifetime. At least I don't think. Why? Because they have this belief that pipelines always leak, and you can't contain them very well, I guess, so let's just not have them. But more than that, if they need more energy, they just will dam another river, because they're one of the largest hydroelectric producers in the world. So they have another means of getting more energy. And they pointed out something else, that their refineries in Montreal can't upgrade our heavy oil. So a couple of other key points that came out of that meeting. Mr. Plamondon asked us when we were going to the US 2 days later, or a few days later, could we also ask the US administration if they would acknowledge Quebec's successful referendum on sovereignty? So we did. I don't know, we didn't get a response really, but we posed the question. We honored our request to do that. Or their request for us to do that. Now there was another thing that came up that I thought was quite good, and that was Mr. Plamondon, and they probably will win the provincial election next year. They're leading in the polls, and they won the last 3 by-elections. And he said, we will acknowledge Alberta's successful referendum on sovereignty. So we reciprocated, we said the same thing. He said we would probably get along a lot better as separate countries than having the federal government get in between and try to take everybody in Canada, put them into a homogenizer and make them all the same. And we're not all the same. Every region in the country is different. The people's values and cultures are a little bit different. So we should be celebrating those differences and working together where we can work together. And that's one of the things we agreed to. We would collaborate better, respecting their views on things, and they would respect our views on things. But here's the thing that I thought was really funny. And some of you will probably know this. But remember when King Charles was here for the opening of Parliament? Do you remember what happened with the Quebec legislature? So the number of political parties formed the Quebec legislature, and in a 100% vote, they voted to end the relationship with the monarchy. Can you imagine? Okay, so they did that, and Mr. Plumond says, well, when I'm elected next year, I'm going to jettison the lieutenant governor as well. And I thought, hey, well, that's pretty good. So think about this. They didn't sign the Constitution in 1982. They've jettisoned the monarchy. They've gotten rid of, they will get rid of the lieutenant governor, or are they already a sovereign country? But it has implications that haven't been defined, because we function in what is called either a parliamentary democracy, which another terminology is a constitutional monarchy. So our governance structure, our federal provincial governance structure, is a constitutional monarchy. But the monarchy is gone for Quebec. So do we even have an obligation to pay equalization payments anymore? I don't know. I don't know the answer to these questions, but I think it's great that Quebec is going to be out. And now the competition is who goes first, Alberta or Quebec? You know, and Alberta, we have this chance to get this done in 2026, next year, in the spring. All right, now let me touch on something pragmatic, very pragmatic here. And we're talking about two things. We're going to talk about Mr. Lukasik's question. We're going to talk about what's happening with our court case. So you know that Mr. Lukasik's question is, do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada, correct? Okay, let's look at the outcome of that. Remember, this is a policy question. In the Citizens Initiative Act, you can pose policy questions or you can pose constitutional questions. All right? His is a policy question. Let's assume that his petition goes forward, and there's a good chance he's going to be successful and get the number of signatures on the petition. It then goes to the provincial government. The provincial government has a choice now to pose the same question, or they can change the question. But that referendum is going to cost about $20 million, so there's a cost to this, all right? So let's consider a yes question. I mean a yes answer in a referendum that's posed to the entire public, and the public says, yes, Alberta should remain in Canada. What happens? Nothing happens. Nothing changes, right? Let's assume the question is answered by all of us, and the outcome is no. What happens? Nothing. That's why the Justice Feasby said his question is a nothing burger. That's what he said in court, that Thomas Lukasik's question is a nothing burger. So that would create an interesting scenario, because the Premier says she's going to have a referendum on Alberta sovereignty. Is this better? All right. Why didn't you give it to me earlier? I mean, sound guy, come on. You know? How much are we paying this guy? Nothing, I don't think. Anyhow, we're all volunteers. So in any case, the point that I'm getting at here is with respect to Danielle. She has a problem with her base because 2/3 of her members right now are already in favor of Alberta sovereignty. So if she doesn't hold a proper question on sovereignty, she's worried that it will fracture her base, okay? And it may well do that. So I think that she's going to be in a situation, regardless of the outcome of Mr. Lukasik's petition, when it comes time for the actual referendum, and she's promised, she said to the public there's going to be a referendum in the spring. Okay, so if there's a referendum in the spring, I don't think she can take the risk of having a question that isn't a constitutional question, that isn't going to satisfy what we believe already is a majority of Albertans who support Alberta sovereignty and would vote in favor of Alberta sovereignty if we had a referendum today. I think that's where we are right now. Now, let's look at our question before the courts. Well, there will be a court date to evaluate certain things in November. And then the Justice Feasby said he will make a decision before the end of the year on it. So let's say that he denies our question. So what can we do? Well, we have a lot of clout. And Mitch, I think you're going to touch on this a little bit, aren't you? I'm going to let Mitch touch on this of how we can deal with the MLAs and the Premier. So I'm going to let Mitch deal with that. But if our question is approved, then we can go forward. But here's something interesting to think about. Did you know that Premier Smith could pose exactly the same question that we're posing, and it would not require judicial review? Okay, but when it's posed by a citizen, then ostensibly the requirement, according to the Citizens Initiative Act, and we kind of think this was put in as a stalling tactic, but the requirement here is that a constitutional question has to be compliant with Section 1 and 35.1 of the Constitution. Section 1 is your individual freedoms and rights, and beyond that, Section 35 deals with Aboriginal rights. But if you remember what I said about the Clarity Act, you can't have those discussions until after you have a referendum. So it's going to be interesting to see how Justice Feasby twists himself into a pretzel to try and come up with a reasonable response to this litigation that's occurring right now. Now, I'm going to end off with two things. One is, how many people here trust the polls? All right, so here's a couple of pieces of information. Remember when, prior to the Mr. Trump and the Republicans' massive win in the US, did the polls predict that? No, do you know why? They didn't? Cancel culture. People didn't want to answer honestly to the question about who they were going to vote for. And why? Because they saw so many other people who lost their jobs and were canceled. So think about what happened here in Canada with the trucker convoy and how many people were canceled if they either were involved or they donated $10 or $20 to the convoy and then they had their accounts frozen. So we've seen that occur. What about the Newfoundland Labrador election just the other day? Did the polls predict a Conservative win? They did not. They did not. So this is why when Sarah mentioned that we're at 45%, and I think we're higher than that, and I'm going to give you just one fact to think about, and the fact doesn't necessarily lead to my conclusion, but it leads to food for thought. So 2021. We had a referendum to end equalization, right? 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization. As a thought exercise, how many of that same 62% who voted to end equalization would vote for Alberta sovereignty if they knew the only way to end equalization was for Alberta to become a sovereign country? It's an interesting thought, isn't it? And do you not think that between 2021 and now, the appetite for sovereignty is far greater? You bet it is. Finally, if we were already sovereign, would we join Canada under the current terms and costs of membership? There you go. I rest my case, and Mr. Mitch Sylvester.
Okay. Wow. So all of you on the Freedom Train from what I could see. So here's what I did 2 weeks ago. I called a rally on the 25th of October. And you know why I did that? Because it's the first battle in a battle for a free Alberta. So here's the problem, and here's the solution. The problem is this. Everybody thinks we're wrestling with a monster and we can't win this. Well, we are. But we're a bigger monster. And the whole thing of it is that you have to understand that in order for us to beat that monster, you have to become a monster of your own. And the only way that you can become a monster of your own is to simply show up. So I was in Regina on the weekend, and I did a Prairie Rising conference, and there was a soldier there. And he was talking about the currency that people are going to pay to get their freedom. Our forefathers paid in blood. That was their currency. I'm asking for your time. Now, there's a big difference there. I will make you kind of a promise. If I call you to come, and you come 10 days in 1 year, we will win this. That means you stop everything, you don't go to hockey, you don't come up with an excuse, you come. And if you decide to do that, and we get 400,000 people in the street of Edmonton, and the next time we get 800,000 people in the street of Edmonton, it'll be over. That's it. It's no harder than that. So therefore, on Saturday at 4 o'clock in Edmonton, could be day one of my 10 days. Come on Saturday and bring your friends. Because that is what's going to take. Because I'm going to tell you why it's going to take that. Because the UCP does not want this. Do you know why they don't want this? Because they're going to lose their jobs. Everything is going to change in a new and free and independent Alberta. We're going to have a constitutional conference. We're not going to use the Westminster system because it's corrupt. It's horribly corrupt. And it's horribly corrupt everywhere, not just here. UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, it's all the same. So what I'm asking you to do, before we get into all the good reasons why, just in case you forgot, I'll remind you, is this. Before we have to pay in blood, let's try and pay in time. Because communism always comes in on a promise and leaves with a bullet. And that's all there is to it. Once you're in it, you're not getting out of it easily at all. So now we're at the time, or unless you're not paying attention, and by the time I'm done over here, you will understand, I hope, that we're running out of time here. We can't just hang around and say, you know what, I'm going to do this next month. Because next month is going to be a whole different situation than we have now. And that's why we're traveling all over Alberta talking to you every night. How many nights have we been? 6 out of the last 7 or 8 out of the last 10? Like I was 1,400 kilometers from Regina before I went to that conference. It took me a day and a half to get there. So 68 town halls in 5 months. So, and that's good. And I love you guys to death. But I'm doing it for my kids and myself and all the people that, you know, everybody that I know and Albertans. But here's the thing. I've been saying this for 3 years. We're in a war. It's just that the kind of war we're in is an economic war right now. And that's how they're fighting us. That's how they're locking us in. They're taking away our economic values and our future. And I'm going to show you that clearly too. But we have to understand that now is the time to stand up. So whether we like it or not, Saturday is the first one. AGM at the end of November is the next one. So that's 2 dates that I'm going to ask you to come to and bring a lot of people and vote to represent freedoms and rights, your freedoms and rights, your kids' freedoms and rights, your kids' ability to work. And I'm not exaggerating here. What's going on is not funny. I'm going to share something with you. I was never political. 4 years ago, I didn't know the left from the right. I'm telling you the truth. I did not know the difference. I would have had to ask, what's the difference in values between the left and the right? And I did not know, and now I know. I promise you I know now. But I saw an emergency in my hometown during COVID that needed to be fixed. So I got involved, and that's what happened. And I'm not asking you to put in, a full-time job in 85 town halls. I'm asking you for 10 days in the next 12 months. And it's what it's going to take to get it done. All right, I'm going to get going here. So let's go back to that. Well, this is the people we're dealing with. All right, here's the thing. Let's take the emotion out of it. Okay, let's pretend we're all in business. Alberta is our business, and we're joining a buying group. Okay, a buying group. A buying group is designed, because I'm in 2 buying groups in my real business, they're designed to make your business life better. So if you buy with, like I'm in an American buying group, we buy with 475 other stores, big stores in the USA. We get Walmart type pricing, we get extended terms, we have the ability to make more profit because we buy our stuff for less money. Now, Canada is our buying group. Really, if you look at it, they're supposed to be there to make Alberta a better place because you buy with all the provinces and all manner of stuff, and you should be able to trade freely between each other and make each other richer, because that's the way it's designed to work, or supposed to work. Alberta, by the way, is the richest piece of real estate in the world. And I'm going to ask you, would we be naive to think that nobody else wants what we have? Right? You don't have to go far. I mean, can we say that the Chinese would want to have that? Could we say that the Chinese would want to have our resources? And guess what they don't want? Our people, right? Because why would they? They have lots of people of their own. And they have to take care of their people. So it would be in their best interest to come here and say, for example, grab our oil industry, or take control of our farms, or do all manner of stuff like that that they're actually trying to do. And you can hardly blame them. They have none of that stuff that we have. But we can blame ourselves if we're not paying attention and allow them to do it, right? All right, so these are the bills that harm Alberta. Bill C-69, blocking pipelines, which the Supreme Court ruled in our favor and which the Liberals totally ignored. All right, tanker ban in the West, block oil and gas investment. And why would they do that? Why would they block oil and gas development? What benefit is that to Alberta? If you are in a business with Canada and they're your buying group and they're stopping you from earning, would you keep them? And it's a simple answer. I mean, it's a simple answer for me. And here's the other thing. They could change all these injustices that are happening. Confederation is working exactly the way they want it to, right? Because they could change it in one day. They could take it, make a motion, change that, make it equal. So there's 2 Supreme Court justices by region in all of Western Canada, and they have to speak French. So I'm going to ask you a question. I speak French. If you're French speaking, are you more likely to vote Liberal or Conservative? 100%. Right? So the entire social service of Canada is bilingual. So the deep state is bilingual. Does that work in Alberta's favor? No. And it doesn't hurt that we've got all that area and only 2 Supreme Court judges, and Quebec and Ontario have 3 each. So if we wanted to change the Constitution, would they vote in our favor? Not a chance. All right. This is what happens in the House. Representation by population, not so much. All right. So back when Alberta was started in 1904 or 5, or 1904, now tell me if this has changed today. We desire that every Canadian desires that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our own people in the East and build up factories and the workshops of Eastern Canada and contribute in every way to its prosperity. Is that about accurate 120 years later? Absolutely, without a question. And here's what's going on in the Senate. Western Canadian population, 11.7 million. We got 24 Senate seats. Atlantic Canada, 2.4 million, and they have 30 Senate seats. Not much to say about that. Transfer payments. Quebec doesn't put their largest asset in their balance sheets, right? So we put oil and gas in there, they don't put Hydro-Quebec in there. Hydro-Quebec is a monstrous business. But they get $13.3 billion from us for, I guess, staying in Canada. So if you're in your buying group and your Quebec store was pulling, you know, what is that, 25% of it costs us $65 billion a year to run Alberta. We're sending them 20% of that every year for nothing. They don't do anything for us. Would we do it? Alberta's net contribution to Ottawa, $244 billion in 15 years. No one else is close. No one else is close. It's $800 billion is the difference. And that's without opportunity costs, which would be interest and everything else. Look at Quebec at the other end. They've received $327 billion. We've given $244. There's a $550 billion swing there. What would Alberta do with $550 billion? Yeah, absolutely. Canada Pension. Understand how this works. We pay 9, our seniors collect 6. All right? So we have a $3 billion overage. This $3 billion goes into a fund for our seniors. Ontario decided in the 1960s that they would have, in the CPP Act, it would say that $3 billion that we overcontribute would sit there for them with accumulated interest until they called it back when they chose to do it. Danielle Smith could call back our pension with interest since the 60s. How much do you think is in our fund? $400 billion. So I'm going to ask you a silly question. CPP claims at 9.5% interest. So 400 billion, just let's do the math, let's round it off to 10. So we get $40 billion a year in interest from our pension fund. It costs us $65 billion a year to run the whole province, right? So our seniors, and then we would contribute another $9 billion a year to that. So our pension fund, our pension would generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 billion a year. And our seniors get 6. So why hasn't she called it back? Why hasn't she called it back? I've asked her 5 times. Premier, why don't you call the pension back? We had a meeting 2 weeks ago. They said, Mitch, if we give you $2 million, could you call the pension back? I said, in a minute. Once you understand that, why wouldn't you have it back? It's very simple. It's a no-brainer. Go back 10 months and ask Google to see if Danielle Smith said bringing an Alberta pension was a no-brainer. She said it 50 times. I've heard her say it. She put it in the press. But what's stopping it? What's happening? I don't know. But maybe we should find out.
Why do you think she hasn't?
Because I believe that the federal government has gone and told her that if she brings that here, first of all, I'm going to ask you a question. Since you brought it up early, but I'll answer this one question. Is it possible that that money's not there? I believe that may be the reason. Just FYI. All right, so when I became premier, I thought I could fix everything in 6 or 7 months, but everything's broken. What does that mean at the premier's level? That means everything's too corrupt to fix. That's what that means. If the Premier of Alberta, the supreme boss of the province, elected official, and a popular elected official, cannot make changes, there's a big problem. It means it's too corrupt to fix. All right, so just in case you forgot what happened in the last 10 years, I'm going to remind you. Just in case you decide you don't need to come to our rally on Saturday, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a reminder here. All right. Now this I believe with all my heart. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. They are looting our treasury. They are stealing inordinate amounts of money from us every day. And I'm going to tell you something. They know it. Who in here doesn't believe me? We know it. They know we know they know, and they're not doing a damn thing about it. Right? So what does that mean to us? It means that we have elected kings. They are above the law. There is no consequence for anything they do. So my question to you is, if that's actually true, how can we possibly negotiate a better deal for Alberta? It's impossible, because they have no rules. And according to Sarah's presentation on the Statute of Westminster, it may be totally legit, but they have no rules, so they're going to make the rules as they go. So is Alberta divorcing Canada, or is Canada divorcing Alberta? Really, if you think about it. And if you don't believe me, here, audit of $187 billion worth of Liberal infrastructure spending finds 20,000 missing projects. And how many people went to jail? None. And ArriveCan, you know what they did? They sealed the report for 75 years. Our judges. And they did the same thing with the Pfizer documents, but we'll get to that. And Mr. Trudeau, everybody thought Mr. Trudeau was a buffoon. I differ. My opinion of Mr. Trudeau is completely different than that. Mr. Trudeau actually set us up for this mess we're in today. There is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state, and that's our problem. That is treason. Because a post-national state has no borders. Canada ceases to become a country if we become a post-national state. And we will be the first post-national state. So how can we, as a people that are not happy with having, do you believe that we can actually win another Conservative government in Canada ever, after what just happened? So the answer is pretty simple for us. If we want to be ruled by Conservatives and not by this Liberal group, we have to move. We have to make a decision. But within our own borders, we can control our education, we can control our healthcare, we can control all manner of things that we're not doing now, because they're obstructing us, is the best word. And how did Mr. Trudeau accomplish this? So in 1954, there was a statute in the Criminal Code of Canada that said it was illegal for the media to lie to the public. And then, in 2019, Bill C-39 was introduced, making it totally illegal for them to lie to you. And they do. Right? So what does he do? Controls the message. Step number one. Adolf Hitler put a radio in every house in Germany in 1934-35. Why? Everybody thought he was being a nice guy, but he was controlling the message. That's the most important thing you can do there. You have friends that absolutely still believe that they're in 2018 where the media was telling you the truth, right? I mean, guys my age understand that most of their whole lives you could trust the media, because the reporters would go to jail if they lied to you. That's no longer the case, and actually the United States is in the same problem, same place. Here's step two. The very concept of a nation founded by European settlers is offensive to me. Old stock white Canadians are an unpleasant relic, and quite frankly, replaceable, and we will replace them with immigration. So we're getting 2.5 million immigrants a year. There's 40 million of us, so that would take 10 years to replace the entire workforce. And they've been at it for 5 years. And I read a stat here the other day that west of Quebec, from 0 to 35, Canadians are in a minority in every province. And I'm not mad at the immigrants. And because they're coming here for everything that we came here for originally. It's the government that's doing this on purpose to destabilize our society. And it's not those people's fault. They came here for a new life, and for the most part, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They came here to work hard, have a better life than what they left. But our government is clogging our system. It's clogging our schools, it's clogging our health care, it's doing all of that, and they're paying them to come here. $82,000 a year tax-free for a refugee. Tax-free. That's less the 20-25% that we pay. The Pfizer documents, I'm not going to belabor this, but I'm just going to tell you what. That's required reading for everybody. They tried to seal it for 75 years because the Pfizer documents are a horrible thing. That's all I'm telling you. They knew before COVID what was going to happen, and governments are running away from it. I worked very hard to get an inquiry into Alberta's COVID-19 pandemic response, very, very hard, and they blocked me at every spot. Okay. And they admit it. They admit that COVID restrictions are all about political control and power and not about stopping transmission and infection. All right, so the third thing he did during COVID is this. He printed more money than all Canadian prime ministers combined. So what did that do? Created inflation. That's step 3. Control the message, immigration, created inflation. Creating inflation does this. It halves the value of your money. If you double the money supply, the money that you have is only worth half of what it was before that. So they printed that $328 billion without an audit. And all of that since is without an audit. Nobody knows where that money went. It's costing us $1 billion a week in interest now. $1 billion a week in interest. Where does the money go? I'm just going to ask you a stupid question because I'm not that smart. They print $328 billion out of thin air. Canadian dollars, and they give it to our people. And we owe that to somebody. How does that work? How can we possibly owe money to anybody when there's no backing for it? They didn't sell gold. They didn't do anything. They just printed it. And all of a sudden it becomes debt for us. I don't know. I've asked a lot of pretty smart guys that question. And nobody seems to know where that interest money is going. That $1 billion a week that we just pulled out of the sky, and it's going somewhere. And you guys are paying for it. All right. So Mr. Trudeau handed Mr. Carney a car fire, basically. The car was on fire. Everything was going good as far as they're concerned. Now, Danielle, she goes and she says, you got a bill, and she said to us in Bonnyville, Dennis and I were sitting right beside her at a Premier's event in Bonnyville that we were hosting. We had 800 people at $275 a plate that paid to see the Premier, and it was a great event. And we actually had a real nice chat, all of us. And it was a fireside chat so everybody could hear what was going on. But she said, we're going to give them 6 months. She just gave them an extension, right? So 6 months is longer now. So here's the problem with that. Mr. Carney is not a friend of Alberta. So, and here's the first thing he did. She wants the tanker ban fixed, but you know what? He said no. And the Americans are shipping oil right down the coast of Prince Rupert every day with American tankers. But Canadian tankers don't get to go there. So what does that do to Alberta? It landlocks us. Federal government policy is what's landlocking us. We are not landlocked a quarter of what we would be if they wouldn't consciously do it to us. So why do they do it to us? So that they can make us poorer. That's the same reason that we have inflation, so they can make you poorer. A box of 30-06 ammo in my store 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, was $29.99. Same box of ammo today. Same price all over Canada because we check. $69.99. Same thing. This is the same box of ammo Remington's been building for 60 years. It hasn't changed. Just the price went up double and a bit. And they just voted to keep a production cap on Alberta oil. We have one of the largest oil industries in the world, and none of the country in the world would be stupid enough to leave it in the ground except us. Why do they do that? So that we won't create any wealth. And I'm going to show you the GDP in a minute here. I'm not making this up. I really believe that they want our oil right where it's at so that they can access it at another time. Why else would they be doing this? And our natural gas is no better. Do you know that we're selling our natural gas to the US at $4 a unit, and they're turning around and selling it to Europe at $14 a unit? So why aren't we selling it to them at $14 a unit? Japan, Germany, Greece came here, hat in hand, begging for us to sell them natural gas, and Mr. Trudeau said what? It's not in my business plan, right? So let's go back to the buying group deal, and now I'm in my store, and I have a customer walks up to me and said, Mitch, I'm going to give you $3 million a year. I'll buy $3 million a year from you for the next 50 years. And you know what? I'd look at him in the eye and I'd say, you know what? No, that's not my business plan. That's how stupid that is. Like, really? Right? Just imagine. And there it is. Slash oil and gas production by 5%, eliminate thousands of jobs, reduce our GDP by $20 billion. And he brought the carbon tax back after he got elected, right? Just in case you were wondering. And the Premier, I'm going to save this slide, the Premier said 2 weeks ago, and it did not make my day, asked on Mr. Kenney's comment that, that this referendum for independence is going to cause a division among our people, going to make it divisive, and it's not going to be good. I'm going to ask you a question. Who divided Alberta more than Jason Kenney? Like, really? I worked really hard to fire Jason Kenney. Like, really, really hard. That was the first thing I did in politics. And you know what that showed me? It taught me right there and then that we can do this. We fired a sitting premier, never happened before, right? We can leave Canada. It doesn't matter if it's never happened before. There's a pathway for us to do it, a legal pathway for us to do it. We're not going to have to shoot anybody. Well, we might have to if they shoot back, they shoot first. But for right now, we're going to take the peaceful route until they start shooting at us, because I really hope that we could get by that. But let's go back to the fact that they control the media. Mr. Carney said in his book of values, Western society is morally rotten and that is corrupted by capitalism, which has brought about a climate emergency, which is a lie, by the way. This, he claims, requires rigid controls on personal freedom, industry, and corporate funding. Assets will be stranded, and what he says, what he wants ultimately is a technocratic dictatorship. Do you know what that is? That's when big business runs the world. And what is he doing in Canada? He's got a technocratic dictatorship going on here, a really substantial one already. He's got 103 conflicts of interest in 6 months. He's already beaten, Justin only had 82. So you just want to remember this. The $16 glass of orange juice from the MP, and it cost him his position, when he bought an extravagantly expensive glass of orange juice at a restaurant, he had to resign. We are now at a spot here as Canadians where we're not demanding the resignation of our Prime Minister, who's got 103 ethics violations because he's got business conflicts 103 different places. And he lied about it. And if you want to go see it, go see it. It was actually an interview by the CBC. You can go to YouTube it, and you can watch him basically say, look in my eyes, I'm not lying to you. I have no conflict of interest at all. And what's he doing? He's shutting us in. C2, C8, C9, according to that lawyer that did the Bill of Rights with us. John Carpet, right. We'll be in an absolute digital prison by Christmas. Police state is what he calls it. By Christmas. Like, this is October, if that passes. That's how serious this is. That's why we're having a rally Saturday. Because we're at the point right now where we have to flex our muscles and we have to show them we're not going to put up with this. And our rallies are going to get bigger, not smaller. There is no time in history where people who were censoring speech were the good guys. I really, really believe that, and so does everybody in this room. Now, here's the GDP. All right. Gross domestic product growth in Canada for the last 10 years is 1.4% with everything we have here. Ireland, Poland, Turkey, Lithuania, Hungary, Korea are all ahead of us. So basically what that says is we have not grown in 10 years. We lost a decade since Trudeau got into power. If you think for 1 minute that's an accident, you're delusional. That's not an accident. And right since Mr. Carney's been Prime Minister, $85.9 billion in investments have left Canada in 7 months. That's a lot of money. That money creates jobs. That money creates jobs for long term. And it's gone. People don't feel they want to spend it here. And just check number on 2015 when the amount of investment in industrial machinery and equipment went down. Look where we're at in 2025. Thank you. And another stat sheet that shows money fleeing the country. Mr. Carney invested all of his own money in the USA. How's that work? He should have to buy Canada savings bonds. That's what he should have done. Okay, so Mr. Carney secured 42 contracts since becoming Prime Minister. All of them have been with Brookfield Management, his own company. But they pull a pin on the natural gas refineries that would generate money for 50 years. And C-293, are you watching the ostrich deal? Okay, so you know what C-293 says? In the case of an emergency, we can go to your farm and seize your land and your herd. And they're doing it in BC today. And if you don't believe that's real, could you imagine all these beautiful farms we have here? That's how you're going to own nothing and be happy. They're going to create an emergency because then they could take your rights and freedoms away because they've already done it, and you know that. And then they're going to go to your farm and they're going to say, well, here, we're going to take your farm because you have no rights and freedoms left, and by 2035 you will own nothing and you will be unhappy. They hit us with a tariff on canola. So the East is concerned about electric cars, so they tariffed a Chinese electrical car. So the Chinese came back, tariffed their canola 78%. 78%. The canola industry is bigger than the automotive industry, the steel industry, and the aluminum industry combined. FYI. So are they hurting the West? Okay, so here's another wonderful little piece of information. Norway, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, came here to start our oil patch. Now understand, Canada produces, this is an Alberta stat, so let's just use Alberta. Alberta produces about 4.7 million barrels of oil a day. Norway produces 2 million barrels of oil a day. We produce 2.5 times more, okay? They have a 1.95 trillion today, this is an old slide, 1.95 trillion US dollar oil fund, and we're 100 billion in the hole. Where's the money? Where's the money? That's a tremendous amount of money. Like just, you know, the interest on that is like 10% of that's a lot of money. Like that's $1,900 billion. It's actually more than that. It's $2,600 billion because in Canadian dollars it's 40% more than that. But here's the point of that slide. We can do this, right? We have a tremendous amount of industry. We have a tremendous amount of skilled people. We have what they don't have. They're gatekeepers. They're thieves. They're organized criminals, is what they actually are. So whether you want to admit that or not, if the doctor tells you you have cancer and tonight you go to bed, tomorrow morning you still got cancer. And this is what's happening, and we can change this. All right, carbon tax, what they're using as the reason. Carbon taxes cost Canadian billions over 5 years, hurting the economy while reducing CO2 emissions by 11.9 gigatons. China produces 11.9 gigatons of CO2 every day and a half. right? They shut our industry down for 5 years. China produces everything we saved in 1 day and a half. We are not in high historic CO2 levels, ladies and gentlemen. We are not in high CO2 levels. There's a theory out there that the ocean is warming from underneath, and that's what's causing the increase in CO2. So the volcanic action in the core of the Earth is actually doing it. Coal power stations. China puts an extra one every 2 weeks. They have 1,161. And guess what? If that CO2 pollution is out there, it blows over top of us. Okay, I got a minute to go. Those countries don't pay carbon tax, we do. Why isn't China concerned about climate change? Because they're already a communist government. We pay 43% of our income in taxes. In a free and independent Alberta, that could be 12%. They're printing it, they're stealing it, we're paying them tax, and they're stealing the rest from us here. And there's the list. We pay 34 taxes, more than any nation in the world. $47 billion every year, 40,000 per Alberta household. You understand that foreign aid is money laundering? $11,000 in $11 billion on gender programs. Last point, and I'm going to go half a minute over here. Gun control. Does anybody care if your neighbor has a gun? How come they care? They don't want to get shot with our guns. That's why they care. That's literally the long and the short of it. Never, ever in the history of the world has it worked out good for the people that got their guns taken away from them. So I'm going to share something with you, and this is my final comment to the whole thing. If you cannot protect your house and yourself, the Americans understood this after the Civil War. They said that an armed militia is necessary for a free and independent state. They want to control the violence so they can intimidate you. That's all it is. If they're in control, if they have your guns, they can control the violence. And then you see that your neighbor's being violated or hurt, you will have much less of an appetite to do anything if you can't even protect yourself from those people. So, the only person coming to save you is the version of yourself that's tired of the current situation. Thank you very much.
Right behind you. Can we give a huge round of applause for these two phenomenal gentlemen? Thank you so much. We're going to open up the floor to some questions. Shane? Pardon? Yeah. Okay, if everybody can have a seat, we're going to spend a few minutes answering people's questions that they have. I also have one thing that I need to do first. I don't know where I lost my cell phone to, so I'm going to have one of the gals ring me up and see if it rings anywhere in here so I can.
If you have any questions, just line it up. I'm just going to pass the mic here, okay?
All right, Shane.
I'll hold the mic.
You've got a mic there.
You're going to hold the mic? It feels weird somebody else holding the mic.
Yeah, sure.
Like, anyways, not really too much of a question. More of one is an observation, and number two is a solution not mentioned. For those who don't know, my name is Shane, and I'm with Blackfeet Health Products. When we speak to health, when we speak to health, and you come with me to a problem, or I see a problem within your health, I have to provide you with the solution. Because if I'm not doing my job, right? If I'm not doing that. So we had mentioned there's a $324 billion printing press that is just printing itself out of existence and loading us with the debt. That's a problem. We all agree, right? And no judgment, Mitch. I'm not here to judge, but you didn't provide a solution, and you call yourself an educational. Don't talk yet, please. You claim to be an educational entity. when we speak to problems, you have to speak to solution, because if you're not doing that, you're just presenting more of the problem. And this is no judgment to the APP. We have a huge problem in this country. It starts with health. AHS, who here thinks that is a public entity? Is it public? Who thinks here this is a private entity? Okay. In fact, for those who don't know, this is a private entity of Laurentian.
But what's the question?
Yes, I'm getting to it. It's the solution. So they're ripping us Albertans off to a huge tune. It's bigger than anything. It's bigger than oil. It's bigger than government. The health owns your freedom.
Please get to the question.
And here's the solution with the printing press that's out of control. If we don't talk to the solution, what I'm holding here is pure gold. This is 999 fine 24 karat gold. When we talk about currency, when we talk about fiat dollars, we're talking about debt. And I would advise all of you to get gold and silver if you can find it. This is fractionalized. This is affordable. All of you can afford this. So if we don't provide solutions to this monster debt, we will be so laden in debt that you will be destitute and homeless and very sick and very abused.
But what was the question then?
The solution, it's not a question, Max. We're talking about solutions. So in your defense, your health and your wealth.
Let me answer that, because I want to. You don't know. Hello. All right, the solution is a free and independent Alberta. That's how we started this. That was the first sentence out of my mouth. So I want you to understand something. You cannot deal with corrupt people legally. We have an opportunity to try and do that legally. So we have to take advantage of that, come out, support this, vote for it in a referendum, and then if they say no, then we have to deal with it then. Right now, the path is straight and very clear. We need a clear question on a referendum vote, and it has to be a standalone question, and we have to hold the UCP's feet to the fire because they don't want it, and we have to attend the AGM and make them do this. And the only way we can make them do this is if they're afraid that we're going to take them out of power. So that is the solution. Show up at the AGM, show up at your local AGMs, and put people that represent you in positions of power. That's it.
Thank you. My question is about Danielle Smith. She pledged allegiance to the King. So how can we really trust her and the UCP party?
Well,
Okay.
go first.
So let me, well, so Mitch and I have, this is kind of fun because Mitch is very skeptical about Danielle. I'm skeptical as well in terms of answering the question, where's she really at? You know, does she want sovereignty or does she not want sovereignty or what? But there's a couple of key things that are really important to understand. For her to get on the sovereignty train, as it were, she has to be able to do two things, primarily. One, she has to demonstrate that she can govern. So she's doing that. But she also has to demonstrate to the public that we cannot get a deal with the federal government. And guess what? She's doing that brilliantly, right? We're not getting any traction on any of her 9 demands or any of the 8 constitutional changes that she wants to make. But do we know where she really is on all of this? We don't. But she's painted herself into a corner, and she's very worried about fracturing the UCP party. And the only way to prevent that is to hold an actual referendum on changing the Constitution, removing Alberta from the Constitution, and Alberta becomes a sovereign country. That is the only real solution that she has. Otherwise, there's a whole group. I mean, we have well over 1 million supporters already for Alberta sovereignty. So knowing that, she knows that, what does she do? Back to you, Mitch.
okay, so she told us it was going to be 6 months, right? Now she's extending that. So in 2027, we have another election. So if she extends this past next spring, she's going to walk up to us and she's going to say, you know what? We don't want to affect the next election. We don't want the NDP to get in. So let's put this off. And that is what I'm afraid of. Because what's happened is that she keeps kicking the can down the road and she's not accomplishing anything. And she's flat out saying, I'm going to do everything I can to stop this process from happening. So at some point, you have to believe her. And here's my question to everybody in the room. And I did a lot of work to put Danielle Smith there, just so you know. I've been a big supporter. However, if we have to choose between a sovereign Alberta and Danielle Smith as premier, what are we going to do? Just asking the question. So that may be the choices that she leaves us with. But she will have had multiple conversations with us about that before any of that happens, because we talk to her regularly, and we've asked her 100 times to get ahead of this with us. If she chooses to do that, then we'll be very pleased. If she chooses not to do that, then we have to react. That's basically where we're at. Go ahead, sir.
You want to answer the question? Okay.
So the question was, and it's probably one of the Westminster supporters, about her swearing allegiance to the King. So I'd like to answer that. So let me answer that. If you read what the King of England has to swear to, it was prepared by evangelicals, evangelical Christians, and it was to swear allegiance to the God of the Bible. So if she swears allegiance to the King of England, that's based on his adhering to the Bible. If he's not adhering to the Bible, does she have to, would anyone have to, who is actually British, have to do that? Second of all, how would they ever enforce something like that? If you believe in the Statute of Westminster, it's unenforceable. What is the King of England going to come here and step on our foot? No, that's the answer.
Well, don't forget, Quebec legislature voted to end their relationship with the monarchy right there. So this is coming. This is coming.
Next question, 20 seconds.
Okay. So before I ask the question, I'd like to spark an idea, so to speak. Okay. It all comes down to systems of government. Am I correct? If we look at, most of us are in a democracy, but when we look at the history of democracy, right, it's around 500 BC or whatever. If, please correct me if I'm mistaken. From the Greeks, right? And as a species, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Systems, yeah? Well, we've got nervous systems in our brain, digestive systems.
Okay, what's your question?
Okay, so basically, again, I need to give like a general.
Please get to the question.
Okay, sorry. We need to learn how the animal kingdom, because okay.
Your question, please.
How do we learn from science, from biology? We know octopuses have 9 brains with a complex nervous system. How do we learn from the animal kingdom on how to create a system that works? You know.
Stay tuned. We have a proposed constitution for Alberta coming, which will explain exactly that, and it's better than anything out there. It's better than the U.S. Constitution, better than the Swiss Constitution. It has far more accountability and a much smaller government, and you'll love it. So there's your answer.
One quick kind of like add up to that, because even bees, they have complex societal structures. Chimpanzees, gorillas, they have social structures, and they've been around for quite a while. Like how can we learn from them? Because even bees know instinctively.
We have learned from them, sir. We have learned from them. That's the whole point. It's coming. And because it's going to be released to the public, you'll have every opportunity to weigh in on it. Subsequent to a referendum, there'll be a full constitutional conference in which that constitution that we're proposing will be one of the considerations. There you go. Yeah, but you're right. We learn from the animal world as well.
Hi guys, you're amazing. My name's Don Bandit. I've lived in Calgary for 23 years. I don't really have a question, but I have a couple of statements. I did Uber and Lyft for a year and a half, and I constantly asked my customers, who are mostly from the immigrant population, what they thought of immigration. I never got one answer that we got to keep it going. Every single one says we got to stop the immigration right now. On their own families, they are all saying, I don't even want my family coming here because the country's screwed if we don't stop it. Every one of them. And the second one was on this gentleman here, and he was talking about the ancient Greeks. When they voted in a senator, they did an audit on him. 1 year later, when he was stepping out of office, they did another audit. And if one penny was out, they put him to death.
I got a question.
Well, isn't it interesting that Mr. Polyev has challenged the RCMP regarding Trudeau's criminality? Put it that way.
I got a question on my own, actually. We're heading towards the AGM. Oh. We're heading towards the AGM right now, okay? And can you expand on the kind of policies that will be put forward at the AGM on Alberta independence, if you can, in a nutshell?
Well, I know that they asked us not to put any forward because they don't want to be branded as a separatist party. So that was a direct request from me, to me.
Did they say they didn't want to be branded as a
Yeah. Yes.
I got to weigh in on this. Guys, don't use that term. It's like when you have your leg amputated, you've just been separated from your leg. Separation is a bad term. We're sovereign. We're pushing for sovereignty. We're pushing for independence. But sovereignty is a higher form, at least from the Webster's and Oxford Dictionary, than independence. But don't use the term separatist. Use the term sovereignist. It's okay. We all have Joe Biden moments, Mitch.
Anyone's got more questions, just line it up here, please. I think
we're good.
Oh, he's got a... Do you have a question? Yeah. Okay, 20 seconds.
So lots of people from the UCP party who have been involved in politics a long time. I'm like you, Mitch. I've only got involved in the last 6 years. You're promoting the United Communist Party, and lots of them who have belonged to the UCP for years say they don't believe the United Communist Party can be fixed.
Okay.
What's the question? What's the question?
So
I get it. Can it be fixed?
So here's my deal. We don't need another conservative party. I think we get another conservative party, we split the vote. I've always believed that we should work inside the UCP party and replace the bad people that are in it. And I think that's the way I see this, because it takes 12 to 15 years to get a new party elected. I don't think we got 12 to 15 years. So as far as I'm concerned, that's why I'm saying, use one of my 10 days and come to the AGM and show these guys that you exist. And they all want to get back in, right? Like, I've had phone calls from ministers that are understanding that I am going to do my very best to primary them out if they don't have our shared values. And they're doing the same thing. Like, this is totally legal and it's total democracy, but the whole thing is, if they're scared enough, then they'll change the way they do things. And that's our whole system. And the only thing that'll scare them is you guys showing up. I promise you, it'll scare them. So you just got to show up and continue to show up.
First of all, before I even ask my question, I want to say thank you. Sure.
Please, people in the room, please.
I want to say thank you to you gentlemen for dedicating your lives to protecting us. And I want you to know that, as we all know, you have detractors on social media, same one I have, And I want you to know that privately I have told that individual that there's going to come a day when they're going to be making statues out of you men. And so, because what they're saying is, what he's saying is awful about all of us and untrue. But I had one comment to make with a question. Unlike you, I do trust Smith. And I think that one of my concerns or questions is, have you considered that she isn't ready, because she's currently trying to make a third police force because the sheriffs were taken over by the bureaucracy and they're dirty. So she's doing a third one. And is it possible that in case what you're hoping comes through with Trump doesn't go through, that her goal, because based on what she did with her panel, my feeling was she's fully supportive, and what you said she said is supportive, but maybe it's about timing that's her concern and not related to her own election, but just in having the province prepared, because you're already aware of the issues with the courts and so forth, Mitch.
So you know what, Sarah, honest to God, between us, I would be very happy if she did something. But that's what I want her to do. I want her to do something. And you know, that's, I've asked her 100 times, like in private conversation, you've got to represent the grassroots people of Alberta, because if by not doing things that you've told us you're going to do, like how is she going to say that if Carney doesn't come out with this, it's going to affect national unity, and then she keeps giving him extensions. But the whole thing is, I know, but we've been making excuses for her for 2.5 years. And I'm just saying that I would like her to, and it's not just her, like she's got caucus there, and they're just as guilty, because I mean, they could push her to do things too. But at some point, they're going to have to decide whether they're going to pick the people of Alberta or the Liberal Party of Canada, because that's exactly what the choices are.
My question to you, Mitch, that you missed was that we're in the middle of a war. You're aware of that. And when you're in the middle of a war, you can't divulge to your public or your enemy what your challenges are, or what your plans are. And what I'm asking you is, have you considered that it's possible that there are things happening that she can't let you know, and that perhaps she's just buying time, not for an election, but to prepare us, because we don't have our own military, we don't have our own police force, and we need that.
I've been waiting for her for 2.5 years now, and being very patient. And then we went to her and did the Alberta Bill of Rights last year. That started a conversation between me and her, and I explained to her that she's not accomplishing things and the people are restless, and she asked me why everybody was unhappy, and I explained to her, because you're not moving fast enough. And at some point, she's 2.5 years into her 4-year mandate here. And I mean, if we're running into something that's, and we expected a lot from this leader. So, and I'm still expecting a lot, and I would give her a hall pass tomorrow if she said, okay, we're going to, just picture this from my perspective, okay? So let's say Thomas Lukaszuk gets 280,000 signatures on his petition, which he may do. And we have the opportunity to get 500,000 or 1 million, okay? We do. So I've proposed to them that you don't have to even weigh in on this. The left wants it, the right wants it. Sit on the fence, let us do our thing, and let the people of Alberta decide, because that's what the Citizens Initiative was all about. And so she doesn't have to even weigh in here. All she has to do is facilitate the process, which she tried to do or did not try to do. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's a rhetorical question. You don't need to answer it. It's a rhetorical question, because I don't want to get into a long discussion. This is a rhetorical question. If she put the Citizens Initiative Act out there so that citizens of Alberta could put a petition out and get 177,000 signatures on a question that the government hasn't got the courage to ask, why would you put a loophole in it so that Elections Alberta, who's responsible for running elections, is now responsible for the question of the election? Why would you do that? It just seems to me that it's a natural stalling technique, and Sarah, they did the same thing to us on the Bill of Rights. So this is twice.
I come back to what you already know. Her issue is the bureaucracy, and she's had her hands tied.
She's
You
gotta
know it
deal
as
with it.
well as I do.
She's the
You
boss.
said right from the beginning she walked into a corrupt government, so we don't know what she's facing, and you and I both know that a big part of it's the bureaucracy.
Okay, I'll give you the last word on that.
But here's the thing, Sarah, if she wants to deal, and she does, wants to deal with corruption in government, she wants to deal with the bureaucracy, there's one simple way to get there. Hold that referendum. And then we completely gut government and create a new government from the Constitution. Sorry, Sarah, what?
We don't, you know what, Sarah? We can't take that step until we take the first step. The first step is get a referendum for independence.
All right, time to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've watched videos on Bruce Party out of Toronto.
Yes.
I know you guys are familiar with him. I watched one where he was talking about Canada has the Westminster style of government. We also have that style of government here in Alberta.
Yes.
And he mentioned that the only way for us to get away from it is get rid of the government, start with a completely new one. And he said the American governmental system is the gold standard of the world, and that if we use it, but get rid of the bad parts of it.
We're doing
What
it.
about the question?
We're working with Bruce Party. Okay, so it's under control. It's under control.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming. Safe travels home. Thank you so much to both Dennis and to Mitch. Much appreciated, gentlemen.
Are we going to get copies of this?
And don't forget to come on October 25th.
Oh, will it? Yeah. Okay.
That will be fantastic to see.